You should have.
Well, Atta has said a lot. I'm sure that you.
No, I will not.
You
I will
decide
put
on
a
the
summary
right
on the issue.
Okay.
Now, this yesterday was a great day for Ghana.
Okay.
And now the metrics has been settled to the extent that in economic comparisons, you do either quarter-to-quarter comparison or year-on-year comparison. I remember when the budget for 2025 was brought to Parliament, the idea was that these are just mere promises and that we should wait for the outturn. Now, Moro, the outturn is out. And even before the end of the year, the government has even outperformed its targets. Now, when somebody says they would create 800,000 jobs, it means that that foundation might have been built to absorb that number. In September 2025, the IMF, in their fourth review, made a categorical statement that based on the structural reforms implemented by the finance minister, the budget execution rate for 2025, as of September, was already 89%. So the finance minister promises you in 2026, you look at his performance in 2025.
When you talk about execution rates,
execution simply means that government has a program expenditure activities and sources of revenue to finance those activities. Now, when you finance all your activities, it means that you have executed the budget 100%.
Right.
For the government to execute 89% according to the IMF, it means that only 11% is outstanding. And this was as of September 2025. Now, the theme is also critical. If you look at the 2025 budget, the idea was expenditure rationalization and improved revenue collection, because Ghana had a lot of fiscal difficulties in executing critical spending in the country. So the IMF objective was to restore the country to the path of growth and prosperity. Now that the country has been stabilized, it means that the country is now in a position to transit for jobs and prosperity. And that is why I'm saying that you look at the health of an economy to know if it can absorb the working population. Now let's look at the IMF concern in 2022. When the IMF came, total public debt of this country was around 726 billion Ghana cedis. This represented 61.8% as at the time the MPP were leaving office. Now, when you have...
When you say 61, that's debt to GDP?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, when you have... look, from President Nkrumah all the way to President Mahama first term, the total public debt of this country amounted to 122 billion Ghana cedis. President Akufo-Addo took it from 122 billion Ghana cedis all the way to 726 billion Ghana cedis. That is after a total debt forgiveness through the debt exchange program of 105 billion Ghana cedis. The point I'm making is that I explained the first time I came here on your show, and I said that what is making our total public debt to go high is not because of debt accumulation. It's as a result of the exchange differentials. I remember I made that statement here. And I have been vindicated because the finance minister has rolled over 111.1 billion Ghana cedis in the treasury market to pay maturing debt. So you know the net debt is zero. Now, the good news is here. The external component of the debt, which came to about this, with the domestic debt all came to the 726 billion. The external component, because of the way we have managed the cedi, has gave us an exchange gain instead of exchange loss. In 2024, you saw that the currency depreciated by cumulative 19%. This year, it has appreciated by 34%. So that gain alone has significantly brought the total public debt of this country from the 726 billion to about 630 billion, creating enough fiscal space for us to spend on this critical infrastructure I mentioned. Now, the total public debt as at October is around 45%, and this is not even the end year. Moro, let's do micro issues. What Ghanaians want to hear. There was a time where inflation of this country at this for 2022-2023 was around 50-something%. I don't know if you remember. And I'll indicate people here with this issue. Now, inflation of 54%, and you increase public or wage bill by 30%, or salaries of workers by 30%, it means that there will be still about 28% erosion in their savings and their nominal incomes. The drivers of the inflation in 2022-2023, one was a result of exchange instability. Two was non-food inflation. Electricity, because of the cash waterfall mechanism of quarterly adjustments under the IMF program, we were supposed to be increasing non-food inflation items in the basket. Moro, look at the significant shift here. The government had an end-year target of inflation of about 11.9%. As at October, we have already hit single digit of 8%. That is not the concern. Even though in 2024, inflation was around 23.8%, now it's at 8%. But that is not my concern. My concern is the average Ghanaian, what they buy is the food inflation. Currently, food inflation is even lower than the average inflation of 8%, at 6.9%. So that is why a bag of rice, you know what is causing the rice glut in Ghana? It is not because there's no market. People are just not ready to buy it at that price, because generally price of goods and services are on the decline. Investor confidence. Look, a government that just came. Oh, is there a problem?
Yes.
What's it? Okay.
Your explanation for the food glut thing, that's a
very
dangerous
thing. No,
it's
saying. Not. And I can prove it because I am a rice farmer. I have over 2,000 bags of rice in my warehouse.
No.
And the government is now giving a guaranteed price. Then you are maybe. No. We can discuss that. Let me utilize my time. And
that's his theory. He's entitled to it. You can critique it, which is fine. But please go ahead.
Calm down.
I'm not.
Now the investor confidence.
I'm just telling you that it's a dangerous thing you're saying. But carry on.
Investor confidence. Okay. Look, when you are doing analysis of economic policy, Ghana is not an island on ourselves. So we interact with the world. If you look at the AFTA program, the idea was to trade among ourselves. Currently, Ghana is the third among the African countries to have increased our trade with other partners by above 10%. The African average about 17%. That is not the issue. From June to September, the total foreign currency inflows into this country, into the private sector for manufacturing and industry, is $798 million. Are you surprised?
Are you talking about FDIs?
Yes, FDIs. And are you surprised about that? I am not surprised because if you look at the external credit rating regime, it has given investors some hope that the risk levels in this country have substantially reduced. The IMF program will be exiting in April. Also a signal to the international investors that Ghana is the best place of trade and investment destinations. And that is why yesterday, Dr. Atufo announced boldly that government of Ghana will return back into the Eurobond market at concessional rate because the external credit ratings is good for Ghana. And our reserve position has much improved. Look, Ghana has transitioned properly from the crisis mood we found ourselves in 2024 now to transformative mood. In 2024, you remember, they did several press conferences, and the concern was that I had two choices. One was to save lives, and the other one was to borrow unnecessarily, and I chose to save lives. Now we have moved from that era of crisis. Now we are in the era of development, industrialization, and to propel the 24-hour economy. Public spending. The concentration of the MPP, if you remember, in 2024, just in the bid to secure votes, was construction of critical infrastructure like astroturfs, some roads constructions, and all those things. That, the whole of 2024, in an election year, the total public spending as a percentage of GDP was only 0.6%. Currently, it has increased to 0.9%. That demonstrates that even in first year, President Mahama has already committed to improving public spending. And that's, are you surprised also? No, because if you look at the amendments that we did to the Get Fund Levy, you realize that all monies and timely releases of GET fund allocation has been given. And that's why yesterday he promised some critical interventions in ending double track, because all the monies that is accrued for GET fund has been released up to date. Monies accrued for DACF has been transferred, 80% of it has been transferred to the assembly up to date. Even MPs, the minority MPs yesterday, whilst they were reading the budget, they received updates on the third quarter of their DACF, the MPs Common Fund, and also the Projects Fund. The state of the Ghanaian economy is now in position for us to absorb the public workers into the fiscal, the public space. Why? Ignorance again. At the beginning of the year, I was here with you, Moro. They said they grew the economy by, I think, 5.7%, if you remember. And that why is Dr. Atuforsen projecting to grow at 4%? I don't know if you remember.
I do.
And the concern was that, so even what they want to do and call it a reset, it means that we even did better. Is that not the concern? And I told them that this was anchored on the growth framework established in the IMF program. So the IMF normally gives a medium-term growth framework every year, what they expect the growth to be. So you cannot go beyond what the IMF projection is. Now the reality is now out. The projected growth rate that we expected at 4% and non-oil growth about 4.4%. Now the growth itself is about 6.3%, higher than that of 2024. Non-oil growth of 7.8%, higher than that of 2024. So it is not the projection. In fact, yesterday, Dr. Atuforsen projected to grow at 4% again for 2026. But we know it is because of the growth framework as established by the IMF for the medium to long-term framework of 2026 to 2029. Also, agriculture sector. That is why the food inflation is coming down, because agri sector has grown by about 4%, 4 to 6%. So let's look at fiscal deficit. You remember the bane of this country started in 2020 elections. The NPP wanted to win election at all costs. That is why you saw the dubious contracts currently being investigated all came from 2020 elections. After the elections, for the first time in a long while, we saw that public deficit rose from 2019 of 7.8% to 15% deficit. Moro, Dr. Atuforsen has brought it down to 2.8%, and we intend to do better. Now, some policy interventions. In the morning on TV3, I had made some bold declaratives based on the size and the growth of our country that government can absorb the following. And this is to the business community and household, that COVID levy is currently before Parliament Finance Committee. The amendment to repeal the COVID levy. It was a scam. Why do you keep on paying something that does not exist? The reason why we couldn't remove it in 2024 was because these people have signed on to that handle in the IMF program. So the IMF suggested that we have to do a complete overhaul of our VAT regime. That is why we couldn't remove it in 2025, but now it's gone. I also made a statement that effective VAT rate will decrease from 21.9% to 20%, and yesterday he did, because I was with GUTA, an Importers and Exporters Association, and they gave me evidence of distorted tax regimes. Tax on tax, that's what we call double taxation. Look, if I have a pen like this, and there's an input VAT on it, and I just buy this and add, you are supposed to charge the VAT on the total addition. You are not supposed to charge the VAT on the two. So that's why we have the input-output deductibility, so that the GRA gives you the tax credit. These people came and did the flat rate, so it is applicable And they make sure that those import output deductibility framework where companies go and apply for tax credits is no more there. So it was hurting businesses. So you need to make the tax regime so simpler, because one of the principles when you are imposing the tax is that it must be what? Convenient for the taxpayer. It must be economical to the taxpayer. And it must engineer a sense of hope. And the utilization of the tax itself must be to the interest of the taxpayer. So if you make a very complex tax regime where businesses are suffering and government cannot even, that's why yesterday you saw the amount of money that we lose through the port. So all these difficulties, we seek to simplify and rationalize the tax base to create an enabling environment for businesses. Also, let me now come to the social spending proper. Moro, fortunately, I am happy to announce that in my constituency, I am part of the constituencies to benefit from the 10 kilometers of roads, asphaltic roads. I'm also proud to announce that Sanargo will benefit our share of the big push. And currently, as we speak, the contractor is already doing the markings on our roads. And I am positive that that will be done. You talk about 800,000 jobs. The finance minister was clear. Every policy, and that's what you normally do when you are bringing policy. Apart from doing the fiscal analysis, you do the social impact analysis. The oil palm plantation of 100,000 hectares, the idea is to create 250,000 jobs. And he explained, if you look at the Asian tigers, they believe that a hectare of land can create 2.5 workers. That's averaging 2 workers. And then the 5 becomes the machinery. So he's of the view that if you take 2.5 of the 100,000 hectares that he wants to develop, that is about 250,000. However, there are some statutory agencies that naturally do their recruitments. For example, the teachers, nurses, and all those. I hear people complain they didn't hear that, but that is just a highlight of it. But the details of the recruitment covers all sectors of the economy. However, there are some companies that are non-subvented by government. And because of that, they employ based on the balance sheet of the government. Those numbers are not captured here. And I can demonstrate. For example, if you take the companies like Ghana Airport Company and all those, they can recruit based on the balance sheet, the health of the balance sheet. But that will not be captured under the 850,000 jobs. Then the farm service centers. We promised to establish farm service centers in agricultural and commercial economic zones. And the idea was to make sure that the cost of farming is reduced, because what is driving food prices is as a result of the cost of production of those foods. So currently, we seek to, I'll be done soon. We seek to do 50 districts will receive about 4,000 tractors and machines. That includes 660 tractors, 300 trailers, and 50 combined harvesters at competitive prices. In fact, the Ministry currently of Agri will open tenders for that. Unlike what we saw during the drip procurements. Let me mention these few things about the 24-hour economy. Government intends to spend about 160 million Ghana cedis on the Big Push program. And look at the critical areas. Sometimes they ask us that, where is the Big Push? Do you see it? Big Push has never been defined as a policy. It's not a policy, it's a framework. And then several policies will come under that. And look at the projects. And that's where my heart is, because I'm an MP representing Northern Region. One, we are going to do the Tamale Air Cargo and Yapi Port. The air cargo will now be the aviation center in terms of cargo for the rest of Ghana. It will all be now in Tamale. DHL and all those other places can now land there. It creates an economy for the people of the Northern Region. Every district, by the end of June next year, will have a modern 24-hour market. If you see the design, I don't know, Moro, have you seen the designs? If you see the designs, you'll be happy with the work that government is doing. Through GIFT and other partners and Development Bank Ghana, we are giving tax incentives. And ECG and Ministry of Energy and Green Transition is also providing smart metering program that will make cost of energy. Look, I sat with businesses at as a member of the trade committee when we visit the port. Their major concern is cost of power. Government is using about 450 megawatts of power through solar. That will reduce the cost of generation and then sell for either the free zones enclave and that of the other interests. Finally, critical big push program. I can't finish without mentioning them. Look at the Accra-Kumasi Expressway you just showed. If you are going to Accra, Kumasi currently, and you use Konongo, look at the level of traffic that you'll be there. Even Kumasi Township. So having something like this goes beyond politics. Even Nigeria, I have visited Abuja. The day that they were to inaugurate, swear in President Tinubu, I was in Abuja. And they have expressways. So it makes life better for commuters and business people to do. And then let me use this opportunity to thank President Mahama. And Moro, I'll leave this document with you. Comparative analysis of macro and microeconomic performances, 2024 versus 2025. Growth for 2024, 5.7%. Growth for 2025, 6.3%. Inflation, 23.8%, currently at 8%. Debt to GDP ratio of 61.8%, currently at 45%. Fiscal deficit, 2024, higher of 3.4%, currently at 2.8%. Non-oil growth, 7.8%. Meanwhile, at their time, it was 6.3%. When you have this data that measures the foundation of this country, you will not be surprised to see why Atufo said he will develop this country and employ 800,000 people.